So let's talk about ship signatures. To be clear, they are mostly known to be part of the ship's stealth values and missile lock-on systems. In total, there are 3 signatures: the infrared, electromagnetic, and cross-section. Each of them is a specific value and can be affected in some way. For most casual players, this can mean little to nothing, so there is no need to focus on it. But let's go a bit deeper and start with the infrared, also known as the IR signature. Simply put, this is your ship's heat signature. Every time you turn on your ship, it grows. Every time you use boost, it should grow a little, making you easier to be spotted or targeted by specific missile types. It can be reduced by better coolers or maximizing the energy output to your coolers, thus reducing the heat output. There are many components which do have a lower heat signature. Most often the best for reducing infrared and electromagnetic are the stealth components, and the difference compared to other modules is quite massive. But usually these modules have a trade-off, so keep that in mind. This signature is mostly affected by the power plants and coolers. Swapping out shields affects it a little bit, and swapping out weapons should have minimal or even no effect on it. Good example of growing this signature is you having really bad coolers, or you have maximum power output and minimum coolers output, thus this heat signature grows. Everything that can grow heat and reduce cooling will affect this signature. Next we have the electromagnetic, or also known as EM signature. This is the power output signature. If your ship uses a lot of power, or precisely modules which use a lot of power, this signature can be pretty big. The EM signature is also affected by the stealth modules in a pretty big scale. And unlike the infrared, swapping out weapons and shields here will affect the signature as well. For example, distortion and energy weapons will have bigger electromagnetic outputs, while most ballistic weapons will have very minimal signature. There are exceptions, of course, depending on the specific weapon, but in the end they have a massive effect on electromagnetic signatures. Thus, if you want to maximize staying hidden, well, you might want to pick weapons which you often don't. The old UI actually allowed us to manually control pretty much all the components we give power to, so this used to be a signature you could have very specific control over. Now a bit less though. And for last we have the cross-section. This is your ship's physical size. It is not that easily affected unless you want to lose a wing or part of your ship, and thus suffer some mobility penalties or perhaps even loss of weapons. It is something you don't really want to change, as usually there will be negative side effects on your ship. It also means that big ships really cannot be that stealthy. While many smaller ships can be detected by the ping or the locations can be found, for big ships it doesn't really matter, depending on the size of course, as some can be visually recognized from really far away and actually pop up even if they would be built around stealth. Technically this signature should be dependent on the angle of the ship, but I believe it only has one value here and visual spotting is only affected by the angle. So these 3 are the signatures. I believe it was the electromagnetic and infrared which are mostly affected by the ship's automatic spotting. That is if they get close enough. The cross-section can also be spotted, but I believe it is more likely to be discovered by a ping. Or that is at least how I remember it. Things do change quite often, so if I am wrong about this, surely someone will let me know. You may have noticed the new UI shows signatures under power tab, and there are these maximum numbers and active numbers. Don't really focus on them at the moment, as they don't seem to reflect correct values, since they are either stagnant or they keep jumping too much. Now about the missiles, there are equally 3 types of missiles based on the signatures I just went over. The missiles themselves can fall into other subcategories like cluster missiles, but they will also be focused on one of these signatures. With infrared it is rather simple, just pop some flares and move away from the direct line of missile. Fun thing with these is that they can sometimes come back, and I have seen them hit back at the ship that fired them, although this seems to be rather rare. To lose these missiles, I usually fire 3 to 5 flares. It is also dependent on your ship's signature, how well the specific missile type is locked on, so you might need to spend more or less flares to lose it. The upside is infrared missiles fast lock on, and can be even done at rather close range. With the electromagnetic you kinda have the same deal, however I don't think I have seen them return like infrared missiles have done. To counter these, it is ideal to release a collection of at least 5 flares and move away from missiles' flight path. Similar to the infrared, with bigger signature and bigger ship, you should pop more flares. The lock-on these missiles should be a bit more optimal, as it usually takes a bit longer to lock on and can be done from far away, but this also gives your opponent quite a long warning period, so you can keep that in mind. Using the cross-section missiles, your only clear 100% hope is breaking the line of sight. Don't get me wrong, they can miss, but flares are less efficient against them. At the moment, I think only the signature size really affects the target acquisition time, and to my knowledge, chaff is not really that effective here as well. It doesn't mean the countermeasures don't work, but they are less likely to work against the cross-section. That raises a question: what is chaff good for? Well, it loses you into a cloud, thus breaking the targeting. Not just for players trying to lock onto you or target you, but also a bit for the missiles. It does throw you slightly back into stealth, at least for a brief period, as there is no targeting on you. Only thing is that you can physically be seen. It's a great way to escape, but it doesn't last for long. It does interfere with targeting and tries to mess with the missile lock-on, but it might not always work with the missiles. If you do have a stealthy ship, in a way it can be like Vanish, you just pop it and you kinda disappear if you manage to get enough distance. Because of the many changes over the past few years, or even longer, the missiles have had their ups and downs. They have been more efficient and less. With the reduced combat speed from the master modes, using countermeasures has been made a bit more important than before, while at the same time there are other occasions where these missiles have been utterly useless, so it has had its ups and downs. Signatures do play part in spotting and missiles gameplay, thus providing you with extra stealth and better chances against locked on rockets. The info does keep changing every year, or some changes are made every few months, which once again shake a bit this missile gameplay or stealth part of the game. It's hard to keep track of it all, so I'm sure I may have missed something, but this is how I have become to understand these signatures, these flares, these missiles from doing PvE and even a bit of PvP. Focusing on stealth is mostly best for the smaller ships, and you can have some real fun with it. I'm sure there are those who want to add some extra here or want to correct me. Sure, do that. I'd like to learn something new as well. But anyway, don't forget to like, subscribe, and thanks for watching.